Based on the Metro series of books written by Dmitry Glukhovsky, I decided to take another refresher course on the third installment into the Metro series of games, Metro Exodus. Developed by 4A Games and published by Deep Silver, Exodus continues the series following on from Metro 2033 and Last Light. The story follows Artyom after Russia has been ravaged by a nuclear war and the survivors were driven underground into the Metro tunnels to seek shelter and safety from the disgustingly mutated beasts that roam the Earth's surface. Exodus focuses on Artyom's obsession that he believes there is still human life on the surface, and he's not wrong. Artyom and his goons set off to uncover the mysteries that wait above them. They venture across Russia via a train known as the Aurora, which acts as the squad's headquarters, and while the game has a really dark feel to it, there's plenty of light-hearted moments, and these usually occur on this train with your squad, using the workbench, discussing the next plan, or even necking vodka shots while finding an absolute banging Russian tune on the radio. So let's start with the combat. All of the weapons offer different feedback to the player, sounding and feeling so meaty with a nice and responsive feel to them. The enemy AI during combat are smart and lethal. The humans will flank and move around from cover to cover, attempting to gain the upper hand, and a nice little touch is once you've finally dropped all but one of the enemies, occasionally the last one can surrender and give you the option to either kill them or... Mama said knock you out! One weapon that I thought was really cool was the Tihar, and you'll get this pretty early on. It's a pneumatic rifle with a manual pumping action to maximise the pressure gauge. It was slow, methodical and just so much fun to use, and often coming in handy when trying to be sneaky. And speaking of being sneaky, I don't know if it's just me, but why does switching off lights make me feel like an absolutely masterful espionage sneaking god? It really shouldn't, to be honest, but there's plenty of that in Metro Exodus. The lights play a big part in the stealth, and for me it's almost a little too much. It's pretty daft because if your little green light on your watch is lit, then you're visible, but if not, you're effectively invisible, and it doesn't matter if you're not behind anything or looking an enemy square in the eyes. The mutated beasts that roam the Earth's surface are as brutal as ever, hunting in packs and often lurking in camouflage, waiting to pounce on their prey, which is you. There's bigger and badder monsters than we've ever seen before in past Metro games, and there's a multitude of disgusting and frighteningly new monster designs. Once you reach the desert land, you'll notice there's clear inspiration from the rustic world of Mad Max, and just like Max, we managed to get behind the wheel of a rustic motor. Not quite the magnum opus, but instead a tidy little camper van. The driving is surprisingly smooth. It chugs along nicely with not much speed, but it's still pretty fun to drive, and even though driving feels simplistic and seamless, it's a shame that I'm a complete and utter fucking moron who still managed to get it wedged. There's an incredible amount of lore to engulf the player. Artyom can just wander the train, listening in and taking part in the various conversations, learning about each character and their backstory. First-time players should definitely make an effort to listen into these conversations because they can genuinely be interesting and also lead to them handing out side quests to complete. You can tell an author was involved in the development of this game for sure, but if you're in it for the crash bang wallop, then some of these conversations can drag on, man. Sometimes I was just trying to get out of there to pop off some rounds, but the characters just loving the sound of their own voice, waffling on and on while I'm slowly trying to work my way back into the action.
Are you inching away from me?
No.
Reach your arms out.
I'm always this close.
Sticking with the conversation side of things, a little gripe I've got is Artyom is a voiceless protagonist, which isn't always a deal breaker in RPGs, but in Metro Exodus I felt that it detracted from the overall immersion. We're talking about an author's standard of writing here, and it shows when speaking with NPCs. There's so much dialogue throughout the game, and the impressive writing is let down a little bit with a silent protagonist. It's pretty jarring at times to be asked questions that will be answered by the same NPC NPC that asked that question. What's even more frustrating is Artyom has a monologued voice during the loading screen.
Where were they while we were eating each other alive in the metro?
Metro Exodus is a blended experience of linear level design with some spectacular and scenic semi-open world action. There's areas where it maintains the original Metro game's claustrophobic feel, but it also embodies Artyom with the freedom to explore certain areas, and this variety is an extremely welcome addition to the Metro series. I really enjoyed powering my way through the dark and eerie Metro tunnels in the first two games, but now, stepping onto the contaminated Earth surface, it takes the series to a whole new level. There's the harsh, cold, and yet somehow tranquil snowy marshes, exploring the vast and sprawling desert wasteland that's clearly been inspired by the world of Mad Max, and eventually heading into the deadly but gorgeously lush woodland areas. It was such a refreshing change of scenery. There's a level of detail throughout the world that's pretty breathtaking at times. The sheer volume and variety of clutter in all the appropriate places, the realism of the patina that's grown over the years, accompanied with some absolutely stunning lighting to breathe some forgotten life into the beaten and desolate world. You'll get a little taste of RPG elements in certain ways, such as having alternative endings that are decided by your actions throughout the game, and smaller moments in the game can differ due to the decisions that you make, and certain NPCs will treat you differently, requesting that you holster your gun when approaching or just having no hesitation in opening fire. That word immersion has become a marketing buzzword for games these days, but Metro Exodus is fully deserving of being labelled an immersive game. It's slow paced with slow movement, and Artyom is slow to draw his weapon, but it feels more weighty and lifelike as a result of this. This is backed up further by the manual control of the little unnecessary actions like changing your gas mask filter, charging your flashlight, wiping the gunge off your mask, or even patching up any cracks that have appeared in his visor. Even flicking open his iconic bullet lighter, it just feels great, and even slowing down when running through bushes and cobwebs, because who doesn't stop dead and freak out when your face is assaulted by a spider's web?
There's no need to overreact.
All of these smaller details keep me grounded in the world, things like the clipboard that holds Artyom's map. Rather than being constantly visible in the corner of the screen, he'll physically bring out his map to gain his bearings, and while examining, you're not paused. You'll need to navigate this world using this real map and your own God-given brain, which is refreshing. The same can be said when whipping off his backpack to craft the essentials. All of Artyom's equipment feels like such a tangible extension of him, rather than a totally separated menu which is just for the player. Finding a high vantage point within each area of the world is important, because the strategic use of his binoculars can expose all the map's points of interest appearing on your map with those very gamey yet always inviting question marks. Some games you'll start off with a map that's already packed with these question marks, and some games you'll have to find a high vantage point and then all of the points of interest are exposed in that area. But the points of interest in Metro Exodus need to be searched for before you mark them on your map, just like a real person with a map and a pair of binoculars would, and even then, there's still a level of uncertainty to what you're heading towards once you've spotted that new point of interest. Another aspect to keeping the player's thoughts tuned to the real game world is the lack of upgrades and skill points achieved by your actions, or some random NPC who's set up a non-stop shop for all your gaming needs. There's no ever-expanding wallet of artificial XP you can earn by defeating enemies. Every upgrade to one of Artyom's weapons or equipment is found by scavenging around the world. There's minimal HUD elements to guide you, and there's enough loot to keep those loot-hungry scavenger players fulfilled, but personally, I could go for a little more worthwhile loot to expand on this crafting system. The loot isn't geared to crafting new weapons or upgrades. That can be achieved by finding actual weapon parts and new items to utilise. It's instead geared more towards keeping your already owned weapons and equipment in good shape and crafting ammunition with the necessary materials. One thing I really loved, and more developers definitely need to adopt this approach, is that loot doesn't just glisten to catch your eye, screaming, "Hey, over here, pick me up!" You've got to use your own two eyeballs to find things, and if you look, guess what? You'll find them. Keeping your weapons clean is essential too, because a layer of mud will thicken over your firearm, decreasing the damage and accuracy slowly over time, and it can even jam. If you look closely enough, you'll find items that can only be found once in your entire playthrough, and I appreciate the realism of this as well as the incentive behind them. A compass upgrade, ammo and throwable capacity upgrades, a reinforced helmet and a metal detector are just a few items that can be found that'll add unique and effective ways to complete your missions. There's plenty of importance placed on the consumable loot, which outside of ammo is scrap and chemicals, so keep your eyes to the ground for bodies and possible containers dotted around the world. It all still feels worthwhile, even if the items you're collecting do become a tad repetitive. Those looking for a realistic challenge, I recommend playing on hardcore mode, because on hardcore mode it never felt like I had too much of one item or ammo, giving scavenging an even bigger role to play in the game, whereas some might prefer the luxury of being completely wasteful and firing off rounds without giving a single shit. The loot collected can be utilised on the move thanks to Artyom's swanky new backpack, whipping it off your shoulder in the heat of the battle while hiding behind cover to dodge the enemy's bullets in an attempt to craft your own bullets to add to the gunfight brings such intensity to the combat. There's a good amount of guns you'll find, with each having a decent variety of attachments, and when swapping them out in the field, remembering to disassemble the gun that you're leaving behind to bring the attachments with you is yet another thoughtful process that requires the player's attention. I've also got to mention another little detail, the single barrel shotgun blowing off that little circle of smoke. It's such a cool effect, and another example of the attention to detail that 4A Games invested into Metro Exodus. There was the occasional issue though, and although it's a fairly well polished game, sadly it got progressively tarnished as I progressed. I had issues during one area where I couldn't use my flashlight in an area where light was essential, then I had another issue where whenever I pulled out my map and then put it away, Artyom would either stand up inside the van, meaning I couldn't see ahead, or I'd be left with a floating map. I had to get out and get back in the van constantly to fix this, and there was a few clipping and NPC pathing issues, and once I reached the woodland area, and this was likely down to the volume of foliage in the area, the frame rate just tanked. Another problem I had was the general traversal. It was always a struggle to climb on things, and Artyom feels far too floaty to the point where if you sprint downstairs, you're guaranteed a broken neck. In truth, these were minor issues that weren't that frequent, because overall it's a stunning game, and approaching 3 years since its release, I'm still struggling to think of a post-apocalyptic game that can actually give Metro Exodus a run for its money when it comes to a truly immersive post-apocalyptic feeling. Owners of the PS4 and Xbox One version of Metro Exodus can upgrade for free now and experience the game at 4K 60 FPS on PS5 and Series X with an inclusion of ray tracing. Series S owners can experience the game at 1080p 60 FPS, and it's around £25 or $30 on console, with an offer on both the PS Store and the Xbox Store ending the 17th of August for the Gold Edition at around $10, and that includes all the DLC, which is a bargain. I love the Metro series, such gritty and grounded immersion, and all rounded off with fantastic writing and stunning visuals. If you've already played Metro Exodus, what do you think? Are you on console and yet to experience the next gen upgrade, or will you be jumping in for the first time? Either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.